In all things of nature, there is something of the marvelous. Aristotle. It's time for science outdoors. At the National Science Teachers Association NSTA conference in Atlanta this past March, I interviewed two amazing educators about the importance of going outside when you teach. Autumn Rivera, the Colorado Teacher of the Year and a finalist for National Teacher of the Year, talks about the importance of taking kids outside and on day trips to local areas. She discusses the power of science to help integrate disciplines across the school and how to work with other curriculum areas. We also chat about teacher burnout and strategies on how to help both teachers and students recover after the pandemic. Then it's Andrea Burrows' turn. Ms. Burrows is an award-winning science teacher in Santa Clara, California, with many years of classroom experience. She talks about focusing on exploring the outdoors of your local area to give students real-life context and how science affects us all. We also touch on how impactful garden programs in schools can be, as well as the importance of teacher leadership and connecting with other teachers across all disciplines. And stay tuned at the end of the episode as producer David Lipman reviews the game Photosynthesis from Blue Orange Games.
My name is Autumn Rivera. I'm the Colorado 2022 State Teacher of the Year and finalist for National Teacher of the Year. I'm also a 6th grade science teacher at Glenwood Springs Middle School in the Roaring Fork School District.
Well, Autumn, it's wonderful to meet you. I mean, come on, Teacher of the Year. Colorado, huge amount. And when do you find out about the National Teacher of the Year? What is that all about?
So that happened actually last year. So that was the last year situation. And so there was 4 of us that were selected for finalists, which was really great. It was a really great honor. Our National Teacher of the Year is Kurt Russell, and he is from Ohio, and he was selected
Big Trouble
as
in Little
national.
China and the Thing.
Yeah, he's so great. He's so great. He's good. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Where's he from? I'm sorry.
He's from Ohio.
Ohio.
Yeah.
That's great. Did you have to do a talent competition or something?
We had to do interpretive dancing. Yeah, that's how it was determined.
As it should be. I think all teachers should be judged by their interpretive dance.
Exactly.
So. Well, one of the things you did, you were on a keynote panel here at NSTA, and could you talk a little bit about that because it's really, really interesting. Teachers' voices, humanizing science. What a wonderful topic. So you tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we met this has sort of been in the works for almost a year now. I met with Trish Shelton, who's one of the conference planners for the national conference, and she really wanted to bring teacher voice to this conference and really have that be a big part of it. And so myself and 2 other State Teachers of the Year were invited to come and just share a little bit about what we do and how things work and that interaction between our students and our classrooms. We really wanted to present the idea of place and the importance of place, the importance of building relationships with our students, and then the importance of really helping build background knowledge to help support our students. And so we were able to share all those different stories yesterday, had a little time for a panel at the end with Dr. Stephen Pruitt, and it was a really awesome time. That's great.
I love the teachers helping teachers is a big subject that we've been talking about a lot, and we're going to come back to that. One of the things I talked to you a little bit about, of course, being in Colorado, one of the first things you think of in Colorado is the outdoors.
Exactly.
And how you bring the outdoors into the classroom, which is awesome, and bring the kids to the outdoors. So I want to talk a little bit about that because we were talking with other people about even in an urban situation, that's important. Even if it's a blacktop, you should go outside. But you have this wonderful outdoor classroom. So how do you integrate that into your classes?
I try to take my students outside as much as possible. I think having those experiences where students get to have a common experience to really anchor their learning in something is so important. Mm-hmm. So as much as I can provide the experience to my students, instead of eliciting what they knew in the past, let's provide it to them right now. And then we all know we've had that same experience, and then we can move forward with a higher collective intelligence, being ready to learn and go into whatever unit we're going into. So as much as we can get outside, even yesterday, my sub took the students outside, so we're just trying to get the kids outside exploring as much as we can.
I think one of the aspects of that I don't think I had considered is the idea of putting everybody on common footing. How important is that?
It's so important. If you don't do that, then each student's coming in with a different foundation, and therefore your learning is not as equitable as it can be. Right. So I learned early on in my teaching career, if all I did was draw on students' background knowledge and ask them what they already knew and what they want to know, our classic KWL charts, then I wasn't ever providing them common knowledge. And so then everyone came to it at a different part in the race. And so I realized that if I provided a common experience, whether it was a big, long, week-long Colorado River experience, or maybe it's just an anchoring phenomenon in your classroom or a common text, but if any of those pieces are there, then it allows the students to have this moment where they're like, okay, this is what we're talking about, and then they can move forward and learn together.
Now, you are a middle school teacher, so you just teach science. You don't teach other things, but a lot of the common conversations we've been having here is integrating other subjects into that. Do you work with your other teachers in your school, and how important is that? Because science is one of those things that encompasses English and math and history and social sciences. So how do you work with that?
So I have a really great 6th grade team that's very supportive of each other, and we do a lot of integrated programs. I work in an expeditionary learning school at an EL school, and so that is our goal, is to really try to have these expeditions where students are able to, for example, when we talk about the Colorado River, we're learning about it in our science class. They're reading the book Downriver in their language arts class. They're calculating cubic feet per second in their math class. And so we're able to take all of these different pieces and combine them together to really make sure they're learning about all aspects. It's sort of the avenue how they learn the other skills.
That's great. I love that, because then it all ties together for the kids. They see it all works together, and I think that's wonderful. Do you have any a particular favorite lesson that you like to do? Is there just something that is just the one that you look forward to the most every year?
I love to teach this lesson on density, like introducing density and showing them that anchoring phenomena of Coke and Diet Coke and water, and how one floats and one sinks. And they just are so convinced that I've magically altered the can. Our students don't trust us. And I get it. They don't trust me. I trick them all the time. But they look at me and they're like, okay, she's drilled a hole in the can. She's drained it. And to go through this process of no, it just has to do with the amount of sugar that's dissolved in it. And to be able to tease that answer out, to just keep asking questions, to keep probing. I am never, ever telling them. It's just me asking. And someone else thinks, well, maybe it's this. So then we try it out and see if that makes a difference. Maybe it's this. And then finally someone says, well, Diet and regular Coke, there's some sort of difference. And I show them the amount of sugar in a regular Coke. I show them the amount of artificial sweetener in a Diet Coke. And then slowly they're able to come to this understanding. And to see that happen, it's just so powerful, because the kids get to see it just by asking questions.
That's what you live for, that little light that goes off.
Exactly.
And they go, and there it is. I love that. It occurs to me that science teachers have the most important, they can be the most like wizards than any other teacher.
Yeah.
You can just totally mess with them all day long if you want. That's awesome.
Exactly. And I do. So it's hard. I get that they're like, wait, do we trust her or not? Is this one of your things, Miss Rivera? Is this a thing? And I'm like, no, this is good. Go with it. So yeah.
Well, that's good. I think that forces them to think about that too. Even that's making them learn. Wait a second, I'm not sure about this.
She's not trustworthy. So what's going on?
How about some kids just reactions to nature, to going out on these week-long trips? Some of them may have never done something like that. That must be an amazing occurrence for you as well.
Well, for us too, because I live where I do, it's day trips. It's week-long day trips. We don't have to go far away. It's right in our town. And so to be able to just walk up to the fish hatchery up the street, to be able to walk down to the Colorado River, that's 3 minutes from our school, to take kids rafting. We get off the raft and we walk back to school, because it's the off-ramp is right there by school. And so a lot of that is all just part of living in a rural community in an area that's so rich with so many awesome experiences for students to have.
You wrote something about implementation. You did a paper on it, I believe, and how to be effective, how to put new approaches into schools. Could you talk a little bit about that? What your view on implementation is, how do people work it?
Yeah, I think implementation is something you have to take step by step. I think I have learned the hard way that you can't do it all at once. You need to really pick one or two things, these are going to be the things I'm working on. These are my goals for this year. And each year you build upon that, because you need to master one before you can start mastering the next one. You can't master them all at once, and you end up actually not doing any of them really well. And so I think that slow implementation piece, being a part of that, I know as not only a science teacher, but a district lead in my area, and also a leader within the state. I'm the president-elect of the Colorado Association of Science Teachers. Excellent. And so I'm able to watch that happen at a school level, at a district level, and at a state level. Right. And it's been really interesting to see how each school has done it differently and tried to support their teachers. But in Colorado, we're in the process of just starting this. It's only our 3rd or 4th year of the new science standards in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And so trying to implement that, trying to help support teachers. And one thing I really learned at this conference that just keeps being reiterated this week is the importance of having teachers have sense making themselves before they do that with their students. So let teachers have this experience and let them get down and ask the questions and figure it out. So then when their students have that, they've had that same sense-making experience as their students are going to have.
So you know how to prompt them to get to that next level. Yeah,
exactly.
Because it is interesting. In English, you teach things sort of, here's the lecture, and same with math. But with science, it's definitely letting them take the lead. And that's got to be a tough thing. I think that's that balance of teaching and letting them learn at the same time.
And it can be really scary, especially for some of our veteran science teachers, myself included, to let go of a little bit of that control, because you do let go of that control. And then that's when the magic happens. Like that's when the learning happens. But for a lot of people that are used to doing things a certain way, I think it's hardest for them to sort of shift their mindset. And I think just continually asking those questions and helping them see, like, this is a really exciting way to teach science. This is how you want to teach science.
Right.
And also, because we learned science a certain way in school when we were going to school does not mean that's how we should be teaching it now.
Right.
And helping people understand, like, yeah, that's how you went to school. That's not what we're about now. And we really need to step into this and embrace this because it's exciting. It's a fun way to teach science.
It is. I mean, I think it's just, you see it in the kids' faces. I mean, I think that's, if your kids are excited, they're going to learn.
Yeah.
Because and I've been talking to a lot of people about working with other teachers and things like that. And one of the things I was going to ask you about, looking for support. I mean, it's very cool. I didn't realize, I mean, you're moving up in the world. You're going to district to state. I mean, you know, soon you'll be queen of the world. I'm pretty sure.
That sounds scary.
You'll get there step by step, like you said. But teachers as mentors and helping each other. But what kind of supports are there? I mean, first of all, within your school, obviously working with other teachers, but are there websites or are there like subreddits you would suggest, anything like that, where teachers looking for that sort of support?
I think one of the biggest supports, and this maybe seems silly, but get onto the world of social media. I know that can be scary for many people, but Twitter is a place where I have found so many awesome resources where I'll see a teacher share a picture of something happening in their classroom. I'll comment on that post, like, can I get a copy of that? And every single time I get the link, they send it, I modify it, and I use it. And that's a great place to reach out and do that piece. I think also there's just a lot of great resources out there that you can go to. Go to the Wonder of Science page. NGSS has tons of just information embedded in there. And so really taking time to explore through all of that. I think especially, though, using each other. The great thing about the next generation science standards is they are across our nation. They're not just in individual states. And so I can reach out to someone in California who's been doing this for 10 years to help support me in our state that's just starting the implementation process. And so sharing those resources amongst teachers is an awesome way to really help support your classroom.
Right. Because there's got to be some commonality between it. But, you know, there's also like somebody's teaching in like the Bronx in New York versus someone in Colorado, but there's still going to be some commonality there.
Exactly.
How to get outside.
The SEPs and the CCCs are still the same. And so we still need to do that different ways.
Okay. Do you have any advice for teachers who, you know, might not have that sort of support from districts or maybe are just timid about going outdoors or doing whatever? Any sort of advice for that?
My fellow State Teacher of the Year, Bill Stockton, talked about this yesterday. He's from Montana, and he talked about the importance of making sure that your classroom is bigger than just the four walls in which you teach in. That even in our rural schools, I teach in a rural school district, and I am the only sixth grade science teacher that's on my team. And so a lot of times that can be very isolating. And it's so important for us to open those doors, make those connections, reach out to other teachers, whether it's in your district, whether it's virtual, someone online, but making those connections. And start small. You don't have to jump into it head first, whether it's implementing the new standards, whether it's taking your students out on field work trips. Start small. You don't have to plan a whole week-long thing. You can start with one activity. You can start with bringing an expert speaker into your classroom, but take that risk and try it because every single time the payoff is so worth it.
I would think that in this day and age of social media, I mean, that is such a huge advantage for teachers. Just, you know, go to YouTube, go to Twitter. I mean, it's nice to hear that there's a good side of Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
we don't hear
also
that too often. It's
there's
tons
nice. Of virtual PD out there now. Like one of our COVID gems is we have virtual PD. Sign up for those classes, do those different pieces. There's so many awesome resources out there that as much as you can get involved with that, the more supported you're going to feel.
And speaking of COVID, another recurring thing that we talk about is teacher burnout right now, and declining numbers of teachers and lots of job openings. How do you stay energized? How do you if somebody comes to you and says, "I just don't know if I want to do this anymore"? How do you keep them energized?
I think I just came in from a session from Cherie Goldman, who is the Georgia State Teacher of the Year, and she was just talking about the importance of teacher burnout and that teacher burnout is actually a diagnosable disease by the World Health Organization. And I think first just naming that, like, this is a real thing that I have, and being aware of that.
It's not just stress.
Exactly. Like humanizing the situation. I think as teachers, so many times we're expected to be robots, just like the non-headed robot that just walked by. Yeah. we're expected to be robots and not be humans. And I think humanizing it first and really naming that piece, and then really looking at your boundaries and where are you giving your time. We can't give 110% to every single thing we do. So reevaluating your boundaries, where you're putting your energy, and then what are you also doing in your life that's filling back up that energy piece. Right. So if all the activities you're doing are only ever draining you, then you need to cut some of those activities, because you're not going to be able to sustain that. So finding activities that also support you, whether it's spending time with kids, maybe it's volunteering for a sporting event, maybe it's just going for hikes all the time, but find something that also is filling that back up, so that you can have a better work-life balance.
Because that's one of those things that I don't think the average person understands, how much extra time teachers do. The grading of papers, the stuff they take home. You got to have work-life balance, and teachers have a huge unbalance, I think, most of the time, and that's got to be addressed.
And I think it's important, too, as we look at this idea of trying to help support since the pandemic, we as teachers need more time to do that, and most times we've been given less. And so to really try to look and support, and how can I really help support my students in their classroom, and not just in their science, but in their social emotional learning and all of those different pieces. And I have been given less time to plan for that. And so that can be really draining. And for a teacher, the work isn't done for the day, it's just done for the moment. And then you go to bed and you come back and you do it all again.
Start over.
Exactly.
I know I have 2 teenagers, and I know the pandemic really affected them mentally. I mean, this is a big issue. I think it's one of those things that we're just coming to terms with the idea that, maybe this is a long-term issue. Has that affected you? Have you noticed that in your students, just kind of getting them back into being social and being in the same room together and all that kind of thing?
And I teach in a middle school, and already you're socially awkward in a middle school. Like, that's just like how it works. And to then have students that in 4th grade, in 5th grade, we're not always around other students. And that's where you learn that social maturity is through mistakes, as being in school. And so our students weren't able to do that. And so right now what I'm seeing is students with a very high range of maturity levels. And that's really hard. You can't just magically force someone to mature. It just sort of comes with time. And so I'm seeing a huge range in that, like I have never seen before. And also students who have forgotten how to be in school. And so it's really important for us as a society to really help teach our students and remind our students, not just teachers, because I can't do it all. I need the support of the community too, for all of us, for parents, for community members, to help, this is what we do in school. This is what school's about, to really help our students be in a place where they can learn, and then be in a place where they can continue to grow and recover from our pandemic.
Well, Autumn Rivera, Colorado Teacher of the Year from 2022, thank you so much. Big honor to have you here. And I feel that this recurring theme of asking for help and working with other teachers seems to be a huge keystone right now. Would you agree with that?
Exactly. I think your teacher tribe is very important. So find your people and latch onto them, and we'll get through it together.
That's great. Thank you so much, Autumn.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
I'm Andrea Barros, and I teach at Washington Open Elementary in Santa Clara, and I teach 4th grade.
4th grade. So are you 4th grade science teacher or 4th grade?
I teach 4th grade multiple subjects, but I teach science for the 4th grade. So there are 2 4th grades, and I teach science to both of them.
Because that's a subject that's come up a number of times I want to get back to. But I was wondering in general, our podcast is called It's Time for Science. And one of the things we're trying to our mission statement is finding time for science and how important science is. Why do you think, just overall philosophically, why is science education important for kids?
Because science is how the world works. And also kids are natural scientists because they're so curious about the world. And so doing science with them kind of almost comes naturally. They really enjoy science, and they just have so much to bring to it, like thoughts. Because we were just in a workshop, and one of the things about elementary science is it's really kind of in some ways closer to kids' lived experience, because it's not got to very high levels yet. It's not got to the microscopic level so much. It's more on the level of phenomena that kids might see every day or they might experience in their lives. And so they have thoughts about those things. And so we're building on their lived experiences to some extent. And then to some extent also bringing them things that are outside their lived experience that connect to their lived experience.
One of the things I'm finding interesting as looking at it from the outside is how important it is to bring your local environment, your school environment, your city, and all the things around there. How important is that, and why is it important to get kids involved in, like if you live in the desert, learning about the desert or wherever, just bringing your local community, your local school into science?
Well, I think, for instance, we talk in my classroom a lot about keeping plastic waste out of the waste stream. That's directly relevant to us because our drains drain to the bay. And the bay is a really important ecosystem in our area. And for kids to understand that that is part of our local resource, that's an important part of our environment and that we need to not trash it. And then as well in fourth grade, we talk about the gold rush. And the gold rush is basically what built a lot of California. And it's highly relevant to us in the Bay Area because San Francisco was like the stopping off point.
Right.
And a lot of the structures of our daily lives foundations were laid then. But it also had profound effects on the landscape of California. So we go to gold country and we're going to be looking at how did the gold rush affect the geology of that area. And last week we were talking about how much hydraulic mining affected the San Francisco Bay because the mercury is still in the bay. I think we talk about that quite a bit.
So that's the kind of thing that overall teachers, wherever they live, should be working the environment into their science because it makes it real and relevant to the kids.
Absolutely. And also having garden programs and things like that where you're talking about the plants that grow well in your area and what kind of food plants people ate in your area traditionally. So bringing in the native peoples of the the San Francisco Bay Area. We talk a lot about that because that's part of our social studies curriculum, but we also can see that in our environment, in our gardens, and like in the butterfly garden, for instance.
Another thing I like is teachers seem to be more, I remember as a kid, it was more like, English is now, then there's math, then there's science, but now it feels like there's a more interdisciplinary. How important is that, especially at the younger ages, I think?
I think it's really important because you don't have time for everything. And so if you can try to integrate as much as possible, and I think in our case, science and social studies are kind of fit together a little bit at fourth grade. And to some extent, I think at the state level, they saw it that way. And it still is a little bit siloed, but the more we can make those connections, the easier it is for kids to understand because they're making those, they're building their brain connections. It really, really helps to have continuity across different subject areas so that they can build up their background knowledge.
I would also like to address the idea that especially I think in like the younger grades or K through 3 through 4, teachers may not be trained in science. So it might be a little intimidating. How do you, speaking again to the podcast title, how do you make time for science and how do you teach? What if a teacher comes to you and says, I just don't know what to do? How do I integrate this?
Yeah, we were just talking about that this morning. So we do have the internet. And it is actually pretty easy to find information. So there are places out there where you can find information pretty easily. So you can even watch crash courses on different subjects. You can read the background information in your science adoption. You can find picture books that explain science content really nicely. So sometimes we'll be doing investigations which are on a smaller scale, but then maybe we use picture books to kind of tie that to the larger environment, to the world, things like that. So there's lots of ways to get content. And then sometimes it's just great for kids to be doing research themselves. So, for instance, we go to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and then we have kids do research on different animals or different aspects of that ecosystem, and then they present that to each other.
I was talking to somebody earlier about the idea of even just going out into your class playground. There's so much
Absolutely.
You can do, and even that's just one of the first steps, I would think. Just go out and look at the life and the insects
Right.
and the clouds and all that kind of thing.
Yes, so we do some of that where we're going out and we're looking under rocks for what's living under rocks, and seeing what kinds of plants are in the garden and things like that. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about teacher leadership and what that means to you.
Yeah, teacher leadership is interesting. We were just having conversations yesterday and today about that. So I think we're to some degree constrained by our district. Whatever district you're in, there's always certain constraints that you're working within, and it may be different depending on your district. In our district, we have had science leadership over the years where I've been able to be involved in science leadership. So I do tend to be a resource for my school where people will ask me, how do I do this? And where can I find this? And I don't know how to figure out where to get the resources on this website and things. So sometimes I am in a position where I'm supporting people at my own school. But having teacher leadership in a district is really important, that you have a network and a support structure for each other throughout the district. So in our case, we have a group of teacher leaders that Lawrence Hall of Science helped foster, where we can use each other for support and pick each other's brains and help each other.
I like that. It was we interviewed somebody earlier today who was saying one of his biggest suggestions to teachers is to reach out, is to ask other teachers who know things, and don't be afraid. There's a support group out there, but you got to go kind of
Absolutely. Find it. We were talking about that just this morning, about how important that is, that building a community of peers who are other teacher leaders is so important. And that was, for us, one of the biggest takeaways of this, the IPT project that we did together, was that we built this support structure and network, and that we all have strong relationships.
Because another topic that had come up was teacher burnout, especially after COVID and pandemic and distance learning. Teachers need to have a support system for themselves, I would think. They
absolutely do. And I think as well, having things like science leadership, where we build our own capacity and meet outside the classroom, it really helps us to feel re-energized going back into the classroom. And I think that has really helped. Like, I went to a workshop recently where there was just there pretty much 3 or 4 of us, and we were discussing about Paige Keeley probes, and it was just very re-energizing.
I think that's a term that comes back a lot, because obviously teachers who are listening, preaching to the choir, it's an incredibly draining job, and to be re-energized is imperative.
And that's why we go to places like NSTA, I think,
to see other people going through the same problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
While we have you, can you tell me a little bit about the IPT project? What is it? Give me your elevator pitch on what the IPT project is.
Apart from the fact my mind just went blank. So the IPT project was developed, I think originally it was Stanford Education Department. There were people in Stanford Education Department and the Lawrence Hall of Science, and they wrote an NSF grant to work with a district, which was our district in this particular case, to develop teacher leadership. And the idea was to develop capacity for leadership, content knowledge, and to develop the capacity for argumentation in elementary school classrooms 3-5, to promote student understanding in science via dialogue and discourse between each other, coming to consensus in ideas about science or particular scientific phenomena. So there's a whole load of components, but the bottom line was trying to develop leadership within the district that we could then pass on throughout the district and improve science instruction through argumentation.
And how do you think it's gone? How do you think it's been effective?
Like we said, one of the most important things was building that community among teacher leaders. Mm-hmm. So that was really strong. Unfortunately, the pandemic has sort of truncated a lot of stuff. Yeah. So I think now we're just sort of like trying to build up again.
Hopefully that'll change over time. Hopefully that'll be great.
Yeah.
So. All right, Andrea, thank you so much. That was awesome.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey there. Producer David Lippman here with a quick review of the game Photosynthesis from Blue Orange Games. In this section of the podcast, we'll draw your attention to various pieces of media that we think you'll enjoy or might be fun or useful in the classroom. The game Photosynthesis is a bit difficult to describe without visuals, but the basic mechanics include moving a representational sun around the board 3 times. Within each of these time periods, players can plant seeds and collect light points based on the amount of sun their tree pieces receive. One of the really interesting parts of this game are how the 3 different height tree pieces affect other tree pieces in the path of the sun. Without going into great detail, if a taller tree piece is directly in front of a shorter tree piece, the shorter tree may receive 0 or very few light points. The light points are what allow players to complete actions in the game. Now, while this game does not actually get into the mechanics of photosynthesis, what it does do is create a fun exploration of competition in a small space, as well as a very truncated version of a life cycle. It would be easy to insert more complete class discussions around photosynthesis, competition, and life cycle using this game as a scaffold. Photosynthesis has an age rating of 8, but my thinking was that it would probably go over better with students who are a bit older, except for maybe your more advanced game players. For a game this size, I saw it mostly priced pretty reasonably. That said, finding your own replacement pieces as the game ages might pose a small challenge, but definitely not an insurmountable one. A special thanks to Blue Orange Games for providing us with a review copy of Photosynthesis way back in 2020. And please send us your suggestions for books, games, videos, or anything else you think we should review. Thanks for listening.
It's Time for Science is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lipman and Tom Racine, and is sponsored by School Specialty and FOSS, the full option science system, at the Lawrence Hall of Science, UC Berkeley. Be sure to check out FOSS over on Facebook and Twitter.